They were icons of the silver screen, glamorous, untouchable, and larger than life. But behind the flawless close-ups and carefully crafted studio images, many of Hollywood's most beloved legends were locked in a cycle of heartbreak, scandal, and serial matrimony. In this countdown, we dive deep into the glittering chaos of old Hollywood to uncover the stars who couldn't stop saying, "I do." Some chased love, others chased power, but all left behind a trail of headlines, courtroom drama, and broken vows. You might think you know their stories, but the numbers will shock you. These are the Golden Age stars who made a career out of walking down the aisle. Mickey Rooney, Hollywood's relentless romantic. Mickey Rooney wasn't just one of the most prolific actors in Hollywood history, he was also one of its most relentless romantics. With a career that spanned 9 decades, Rooney's face was once more recognizable than the president's, and behind that fame was a man who said, "I do" more times than any other male star of the Golden Age. He married 8 times, beginning with none other than Ava Gardner, one of the most iconic beauties of the era. That union lasted barely a year. From there, his personal life became a blur of whirlwind romances, short-lived marriages, and tabloid headlines. Rooney wasn't shy about chasing love. He believed in it, even when it kept slipping through his fingers. Each new marriage brought a fresh beginning, a co-star, a beauty queen, a singer. Yet each ended in heartbreak, lawsuits, or quiet separation. Still, he never gave up. Even well into his later years, Rooney approached marriage with the same determination he brought to the screen. To him, love wasn't just a dream, it was a mission. Despite the emotional turbulence, Rooney remained a beloved figure in the industry. He worked constantly, often balancing movie sets and marital drama at the same time. His life is a fascinating study in contrasts: child star and elder icon, comic actor and dramatic talent, hopeless romantic and serial husband. For Mickey Rooney, the spotlight was bright, but it was the aisle he kept returning to. Zsa Zsa Gabor, the queen of the aisle. Zsa Zsa Gabor didn't just embrace fame, she embodied it. With her unmistakable Hungarian accent, sparkling wit, and irresistible confidence, she became as famous for her marriages as she was for her movie roles. In fact, Zsa Zsa practically turned matrimony into an art form, walking down the aisle 9 times, a record among Golden Age actresses. To Zsa Zsa, marriage was less about tradition and more about theatrics, romance, and luxury. She once famously said, "I am a marvelous housekeeper. Every time I leave a man, I keep his house." That quote wasn't just a punchline, it was a declaration of how she navigated love and power in a male-dominated town. Her husbands ranged from actors and industrialists to a hotel magnate and even European royalty. Each union was a headline, and each divorce added another layer to her mystique. But it wasn't just about the men. Zsa Zsa commanded attention in every room she entered. She was bold, unapologetic, and always in control of her image. Yet beneath the diamonds, fur coats, and flamboyant interviews, there was a woman who longed to be loved on her own terms. She thrived on affection and admiration, and if marriage was the price of that pursuit, she paid it willingly, again and again. Zsa Zsa Gabor may not have had the longest-lasting love stories, but she certainly had the most dazzling. In the golden halls of Hollywood history, she remains the undisputed queen of matrimony. Elizabeth Taylor, Hollywood's eternal bride. Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just a movie star, she was a living legend. With violet eyes, stunning beauty, and undeniable screen presence, she captivated audiences from the moment she appeared on camera. But off-screen, her love life became just as epic as the roles she played. Elizabeth Taylor walked down the aisle 8 times, marrying 7 different men, and each relationship seemed to carry the weight and drama of a Hollywood screenplay. From her early marriage at just 18 to hotel heir Conrad Nicky Hilton, to her explosive romance with actor Richard Burton, whom she married not once but twice, Taylor lived and loved on a scale that few could imagine. Her relationships were intense, passionate, and often turbulent, but they were never dull. The world watched transfixed as her personal life unfolded like a soap opera played out on red carpets and magazine covers. But Elizabeth didn't marry for image. She married for love. Or perhaps for what love represented to her: connection, protection, and deep emotional purpose. Each of her husbands played a different role in her story. The first love, the loyal partner, the charismatic equal, the ambitious mismatch. And every time her heart broke, she picked up the pieces and gave love another chance. Despite the public scrutiny, Taylor never apologized for her romantic choices. In fact, she embraced them. In an era when actresses were expected to hide their desires, Elizabeth lived boldly and without shame. Her life was messy, glamorous, and deeply human. Elizabeth Taylor remains one of the most unforgettable figures in Hollywood history, not just for her iconic roles, but for her fearless pursuit of love, no matter how many times it led her to the altar. Lana Turner, the siren who couldn't stay single. Lana Turner was the very definition of Hollywood glamour, sultry, magnetic, and impossible to ignore. Discovered at a soda fountain and transformed into a screen goddess almost overnight, Lana became one of the most desired women in America. But behind the fame and flawless beauty was a woman constantly searching for emotional stability in a town built on illusion. Over the course of her life, Turner married 8 times, each chapter more dramatic than the last. Her husbands included bandleaders, actors, businessmen, even a hypnotist. Each relationship started with passion, and many ended in scandal or heartbreak. But Lana never stopped believing in love. To her, marriage was not just a romantic act, it was a chance to start over, to redefine herself, to anchor her life in something real amid the chaos of Hollywood. Turner's love life was so public, it often overshadowed her work. The tabloids fed on her every move, especially after the infamous incident involving her teenage daughter and her violent boyfriend. But through all of it, Lana remained composed, elegant, a survivor. She knew what the public expected of a screen siren, and she delivered it, even when her personal life was falling apart behind the scenes. What's most striking about Lana Turner isn't the number of marriages, but her resilience. Each divorce didn't break her, it simply gave her another reason to try again. In a time when failure in love could ruin a woman's image, Lana wore her scars like diamonds, polished, proud, and impossible to ignore. Tony Curtis, the leading man who loved to love. Tony Curtis wasn't just a movie star, he was a phenomenon. With his striking good looks, magnetic charm, and streetwise swagger, he became one of the most sought-after leading men of the 1950s and 60s. But while audiences were drawn to his performances in hits like Some Like It Hot and The Defiant Ones, Curtis's off-screen life was a constant swirl of romantic highs and public drama. Over his lifetime, he married 6 times, each relationship adding another layer to the legend of the man who couldn't stop chasing love. His first and most famous marriage was to actress Janet Leigh, a golden couple whose beauty and success made them the envy of Hollywood. Together, they had 2 daughters, including future screen queen Jamie Lee Curtis. But behind the glamorous facade, the marriage began to unravel, strained by fame, temptation, and Tony's growing restlessness. After the divorce, Curtis's romantic life became increasingly unpredictable. He married actresses, models, and even a woman more than 40 years his junior in his final marriage. For Tony, love seemed to represent youth, excitement, and escape, a way to reinvent himself as the years went on. His relationships weren't without controversy, and his impulsive choices often made headlines. But in his own words, Curtis admitted he was addicted to the feeling of being in love. It gave him purpose, it gave him fuel, and sometimes it gave him chaos. Tony Curtis lived fast, worked constantly, and loved deeply, if not always wisely. And through 6 marriages, he remained a man driven by desire, devotion, and the irresistible need to never be alone. Gloria Swanson, the star who lived for reinvention. Gloria Swanson wasn't just a silent film icon, she was the embodiment of reinvention. Fiercely ambitious, unapologetically glamorous, and decades ahead of her time, Swanson lived as boldly off-screen as she did in front of the camera. While most stars struggled to survive the transition from silent films to talkies, Swanson remained relevant through sheer will, talent, and charisma. And when it came to her personal life, she approached love with the same fearless intensity. Over the course of her life, Gloria Swanson was married 6 times, and each marriage reflected a different chapter in her constantly evolving identity. Her first marriage came when she was barely out of her teens, and it wouldn't be her last youthful gamble. As her fame exploded, so did her desire for passion and companionship. Swanson married military men, aristocrats, and even a French nobleman. But none of her unions could keep pace with her ambition or independence. Perhaps the most talked about relationship in her life wasn't even a marriage. It was her long-running affair with Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., patriarch of the Kennedy dynasty. Their secret romance, carried on while he was still married, became one of Hollywood's most whispered about scandals. For years, he supported her career and financed her productions, but when the relationship ended, so did her dream of long-term stability. Still, Swanson refused to be defined by men or mistakes. She was a pioneer in taking control of her own image and career, producing her own films at a time when women in Hollywood rarely held power behind the scenes. Her marriages were many, but none of them dimmed her light. For Gloria Swanson, love was never about surrender. It was about expression, freedom, and staying just one step ahead of expectation. Hedy Lamarr, the genius bombshell who loved like she lived, fearlessly. Hedy Lamarr was more than just a pretty face, much more. Though Hollywood loved to brand her as the most beautiful woman in the world, Hedy's mind was just as captivating as her looks. An inventor, a visionary, and a restless soul, she co-patented a frequency-hopping technology that would later become the foundation for modern Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. But while her contributions to science remained largely unrecognized in her lifetime, her romantic life was always front and center. Over the years, Lamarr married 6 times, each relationship as intense, ambitious, and ultimately short-lived as the last. Her first marriage came early, to an Austrian munitions manufacturer nearly twice her age. It was a controlling, suffocating relationship, one she escaped by fleeing the country in disguise. That bold act set the tone for the rest of her life. Hedy Lamarr would never again let anyone own her. She married musicians, actors, businessmen, men who were drawn to her beauty but often intimidated by her intellect. For Hedy, marriage was a constant experiment, a question of compatibility between heart and mind. But her partners rarely knew how to handle a woman who was both a screen siren and a scientific innovator. The result? A series of unions that burned brightly but never lasted. Hedy's personal life was full of contradictions. She longed for deep connection, yet often found herself pulling away. She craved stability, yet lived with one foot always pointed toward the future. In marriage, as in life, she was always evolving. Though Hollywood often tried to box her in, Hedy Lamarr refused to be simplified. Her 6 marriages may not have brought her lasting love, but they revealed a woman unafraid to risk her heart again and again in pursuit of something real. Rex Harrison, the charming Englishman with a complicated heart. Rex Harrison brought sophistication and elegance to every role he played. With his crisp British accent and razor-sharp wit, he became the quintessential gentleman on screen. Best known for his iconic performance as Professor Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady, Harrison exuded charm and control, but off-screen, his love life was anything but orderly. Over the course of his life, he married 6 times, leaving behind a trail of passion, heartbreak, and emotional wreckage that often contrasted sharply with his polished public image. Harrison's romantic history reads like a winding narrative of intense highs and inevitable unravelings. His marriages included actresses, socialites, and women who, for a time, seemed perfectly cast in the role of his life partner. Yet, over and over again, the curtain would fall on each relationship, revealing a man who was both deeply charismatic and emotionally elusive. He wasn't known for grand public drama, but his personal life often simmered beneath the surface with tension. Colleagues described him as complex, brilliant, but temperamental, affectionate, but distant. That same duality defined his relationships. He could sweep a woman off her feet with intellectual flair and romantic intensity, only to grow restless as time wore on. Despite the failed marriages, Harrison never turned away from love completely. Like many of his era, he seemed to believe that marriage was a natural, even necessary, part of the ideal life, no matter how often it unraveled. Whether driven by genuine hope or a persistent need for companionship, he kept returning to the altar. In the end, Rex Harrison remains one of Hollywood's most fascinating paradoxes, a man of elegance and refinement whose personal life was anything but tidy. 6 marriages later, he proved that even the most refined gentleman can have a deeply tangled heart. Jerry Lee Lewis, the wild heart who couldn't be tamed. Jerry Lee Lewis wasn't Hollywood royalty in the traditional sense, but his life was every bit as dramatic, controversial, and headline-grabbing as any Golden Age legend. Known as one of rock and roll's original firebrands, Lewis lived life with a level of intensity that few could match. Offstage, his love life was just as volatile. Over his lifetime, he was married 7 times, often under circumstances that raised eyebrows and sometimes set off national scandals. From the moment his music career took off in the 1950s, Jerry Lee became a symbol of raw energy and rebellion. But at the height of his fame, his personal decisions nearly destroyed everything. His 3rd marriage to his 13-year-old cousin ignited a public firestorm that halted his career almost overnight. While that scandal never fully disappeared, Lewis continued to pursue love, marrying 4 more times over the decades. Each marriage seemed to follow the same unpredictable rhythm as his music, fast, emotional, and rarely stable. His relationships were often marked by turbulence, with stories of jealousy, control, and emotional chaos swirling around him. Yet for all the upheaval, he remained a man driven by deep, if sometimes chaotic, need for connection. Jerry Lee Lewis didn't conform to anyone's rules, not musically, and certainly not romantically. He lived on instinct, and in his world, love wasn't something to be measured or managed. It was something to be seized, no matter the cost. Each wife became part of his ever-growing legend, another chapter in the story of a man who seemed to live in defiance of convention. Love for Jerry Lee Lewis was never clean or quiet. It was loud, unfiltered, and just like his music, wild to the very end. Rita Hayworth, the love goddess who longed for peace. Rita Hayworth was once dubbed the Love Goddess, a title that captured both her screen presence and the public's fascination with her beauty. With her fiery red hair, smoldering eyes, and sultry performances, she was one of the most iconic stars of the 1940s. But behind that unforgettable face was a woman searching desperately for something Hollywood could never give her: emotional safety. Over the course of her life, Rita Hayworth was married 5 times, each union beginning in hope and ending in quiet disillusionment. Her marriages read like a lineup of extraordinary figures: a businessman, a director, a musician, a Hollywood genius, and even royalty. Orson Welles was perhaps her most famous husband, a brilliant, complicated man whose career rivaled her own. Their union was passionate but brief, undone by creative differences and emotional distance. Later, she married Prince Ali Khan, becoming real-life royalty and igniting an international media frenzy. But even that fairy tale proved fleeting. For all her allure, Rita struggled with intimacy. Her childhood was marked by control and instability, and those early wounds followed her into adulthood. She once said, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but they wake up with me," a haunting reminder that the image Hollywood sold wasn't the woman behind it. Too often, her husbands fell in love with her screen persona, not the complicated human being behind the camera. Though she played seductresses on screen, Rita was not the femme fatale in real life. She wanted the same things so many women of her time did: trust, understanding, and lasting companionship. But time and again, she found herself alone, misunderstood, and miscast in her own love story. Rita Hayworth may have been worshipped by millions, but the peace she truly craved remained just out of reach. Her 5 marriages tell the story not of a star chasing attention, but of a woman hoping love would finally feel safe. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, and his endless search for home. Clark Gable wasn't just a leading man, he was the leading man. With his rugged charm, confident swagger, and unforgettable screen presence, he earned the title, the King of Hollywood. Women adored him, men wanted to be him, and studios built entire films around his magnetism. But behind the bravado and perfectly tailored suits was a man chasing something far more elusive than fame: stability. Gable married 5 times, each marriage shaped by the same quiet yearning for comfort, for belonging, for something real beyond the spotlight. Gable's first marriage came early, to a much older woman who helped guide his career. It wasn't a romance as much as a partnership, strategic and grounded. But as his fame skyrocketed, so did the complexity of his relationships. His most iconic marriage, and perhaps his one true love, was with actress Carole Lombard. Their bond was genuine, joyful, and deeply affectionate, a rare match in a town known for fleeting passion. Her sudden death devastated Gable, and left a void he never quite filled again. The marriages that followed were attempts to recreate what he'd lost, brief moments of companionship that could never compare to what he once had. Though he maintained his reputation as a ladies' man, Gable was surprisingly private and traditional in his personal life. He valued routine, quiet evenings, and a woman who could keep up with him without trying to outshine him. His final marriage to Kay Williams lasted until his death and brought a semblance of peace. But even then, those closest to him said he never truly stopped mourning Lombard. For a man who played so many confident, commanding roles, Clark Gable's off-screen life was marked by vulnerability and a quiet, unfulfilled longing. He may have been Hollywood royalty, but at heart, Gable was just a man searching for a home and willing to marry 5 times to find it. Joan Crawford, the steel-willed star who loved without apology. Joan Crawford was one of the most formidable figures of Hollywood's golden age, a powerhouse performer who refused to be ignored. Her rise from poverty to stardom is the stuff of legend, a studio dancer who transformed herself into an Oscar-winning actress and one of the most recognizable faces of her time. But Joan's ambition didn't stop at her career. In her personal life, she was equally determined to find love, partnership, and a sense of permanence in an industry built on instability. Over the years, she married 4 times, each relationship revealing more about the woman behind the carefully controlled image. Her first marriages were to fellow rising stars, passionate but competitive unions that often collapsed under the weight of ego and career demands. One of her most public relationships was with actor Frank Attone, a sophisticated performer who never quite adjusted to the blinding spotlight that followed his wife. The tension between their personal ambitions ultimately tore them apart. But Joan was never one to retreat. She approached love the way she approached everything else, head-on, with intensity and elegance. Her later marriages, including her union with Pepsi-Cola executive Alfred Steele, reflected a shift in her priorities from passion to partnership. With Steele, she found a rare kind of respect and shared purpose. Their marriage, though tragically cut short, was perhaps the closest she came to lasting emotional security. Still, Crawford's need for control, both in her relationships and in her public persona, often pushed people away. She could be exacting, demanding, and fiercely protective of her image. But beneath that armor was a woman who had fought hard for every ounce of success, and who wanted more than anything to be truly seen and loved for who she was. Joan Crawford's 4 marriages were not failures. They were reflections of a woman constantly evolving, constantly reaching for something more. In love, as in life, she gave everything and never apologized for it. Bette Davis, the star who refused to dim her light. Bette Davis was never the kind of woman to fade into the background. With a stare that could slice through steel and a voice that made every line unforgettable, she was one of Hollywood's fiercest talents and one of its most uncompromising hearts. In her personal life, that same intensity followed her into 4 marriages, each one a reflection of her unwillingness to be anything less than herself. She married musicians, actors, and businessmen, men who admired her strength but often struggled to live with it. Bette didn't play the doting wife, and she didn't pretend to be easy. She was sharp, ambitious, and fully aware of her power, both professionally and emotionally. That didn't always make for peaceful partnerships, but Davis never went looking for peace. She went looking for truth. Love, for her, had to come with equality. And in an era when most women were expected to compromise, she simply wouldn't. When a relationship failed to meet her standards, she left, sometimes quietly, sometimes with headlines, but always on her own terms. Her final marriage lasted the longest, but even that couldn't escape her need for independence. In the end, Bette Davis didn't build her legacy around romance. She built it around fire, talent, and the refusal to ever shrink for anyone. Ava Gardner, the beauty who loved like a storm. Ava Gardner was the kind of woman people didn't forget. With her deep voice, smoldering looks, and natural magnetism, she was one of the most captivating stars of her time. But behind the image of the ultimate screen siren was someone endlessly searching for love, for stability, for something that would last. Over the course of her life, Ava married 3 times, and each of those marriages left a mark on her and on Hollywood history. Her first husband was Mickey Rooney, a megastar at the time and already deep into his own roller coaster of marriages. The union lasted just a year. Her second was bandleader Artie Shaw, a man known for marrying strong, beautiful women and trying to mold them into something else. That didn't sit well with Ava. She was independent, passionate, and not built to be tamed. Then came Frank Sinatra. Their relationship was explosive, both deeply romantic and painfully volatile. They fought, they made up, and they never really let each other go, even after their marriage ended. Sinatra would later call Ava the love of his life, and for her, the feeling was mutual. But love, for Ava, rarely came quietly. It arrived like thunder and often left her alone. She once said she made the same mistake with men over and over again. She fell in love. And when it didn't work, she didn't collapse. She simply moved on with grace, with pain, and with the same fierce spirit that made her unforgettable. Ava Gardner didn't collect marriages like trophies. She gave her heart fully, and when it broke, she wore the pieces like armor. Marilyn Monroe, the icon who kept hoping for forever. Marilyn Monroe was the ultimate Hollywood enigma, radiant, vulnerable, adored by millions, and forever chasing something just out of reach. Her image was flawless, the platinum hair, the breathy voice, the smile that lit up a room. But behind the legend was Norma Jean, a woman who longed for something real. Monroe married 3 times, and each marriage revealed a different side of that longing. Her first marriage came before fame at just 16. It was simple, practical, a way to escape foster care and find stability. But as she transformed into Marilyn, that version of domestic life quickly faded. Stardom pulled her into a different world, and she never looked back. Her second marriage, to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio, was passionate but deeply conflicted. DiMaggio loved her but hated her fame. He wanted a wife. She was becoming a global icon. The pressure crushed them. Still, long after their divorce, he remained quietly devoted to her, sending flowers to her grave for decades. Then came playwright Arthur Miller, the intellectual who seemed to see past the image. For a moment, it looked like Marilyn had found her match. But that marriage, too, fractured under the weight of her insecurities and his disappointment. She wanted to be taken seriously. He grew tired of her struggles. Through it all, Marilyn kept hoping that love could anchor her. But fame had built her a pedestal too high for most men to reach. Her 3 marriages weren't failures. They were attempts to find normalcy in a life that was anything but. Marilyn Monroe may have been the world's most desired woman, but in the end, she was still searching for something simple, to be loved for who she really was. Veronica Lake, the femme fatale who slipped through love's fingers. Veronica Lake was a vision of mystery, cool, ethereal, and unforgettable. With her trademark peekaboo hairstyle and icy stare, she became one of the defining faces of 1940s film noir. But while audiences saw a sultry, untouchable beauty, Veronica's real life was far more turbulent. Beneath the surface was a woman struggling with fame, personal demons, and a deep desire to feel secure. Over the course of her life, Lake was married 3 times, and none of those relationships brought the peace she so badly craved. Her first marriage came early in her career and ended quickly. At the time, she was still on the rise, captivating Hollywood with her looks and cool demeanor, but already feeling the pressure of an industry that offered little room for personal struggle. Her second marriage, to director André Tatoff, lasted longer and produced children, but the relationship eventually crumbled under the weight of professional disappointments and personal instability. By her third marriage, Lake's star had already begun to fade. Her career was in decline, her health was suffering, and the Hollywood machine that once celebrated her had moved on. She continued to seek love, but her reality never matched the dream. The marriages came and went, just like the scripts she stopped receiving. Veronica Lake's legacy is often tied to an image, but the woman behind it was far more complex. Her 3 marriages weren't dramatic tabloid fodder. They were quieter, sadder, and deeply human. She wasn't chasing headlines. She was chasing a sense of peace that never quite stayed with her. In the end, Veronica Lake was a woman out of sync with the world around her, beautiful, talented, and always just slightly out of reach. The golden age of Hollywood wasn't just about elegance and glamour. It was a time of intense emotions, larger-than-life personalities, and love stories that burned fast and bright. These 16 stars weren't afraid to risk their hearts, even when the whole world was watching. Some found lasting love. Others kept searching. But all of them left behind stories that still captivate us decades later. If you enjoyed this look behind the curtain, into the real lives behind the silver screen, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into classic Hollywood, untold stories, and the legends who made it all unforgettable. Like, comment, and share if there's someone on this list who surprised you, or if there's a golden age icon you think should be featured next. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.